Swaddy Cab Jet here from Thailand, my land. My formative years were spent in the 1950s and 1960s growing up in the UK, and what great years they were. I really had a great childhood, I must say. My family were quite poor. They weren't rich by any means. Never owned a car, never owned a telephone, never even owned a fridge until the 70s. You know, it wasn't, we didn't have everything. We had very little, but what we had, we enjoyed, and we never thought that we were any different to anyone else, because everyone else in the town seemed to be the same way. But they were great years, and now I'm sort of starting to realise how good they were, especially when I look around now in 2023 and see what's happening with the world. So this video is about you know, the changes that have happened since I started to grow up in Middlesbrough and here now in Thailand in 2023. So I've just put this little video together with some differences, and I hope you enjoy it. A lot's changed in the past 60 or so years. When I was growing up, I'd never heard of pasta. First time I heard about it was when someone put an April Fool's joke on the news about pasta being grown on trees in Italy. There was a kid in my class called Stephen Curry, and there was a shop in town called Curry's that sold TVs. But I'd never heard of curry as a meal until I left school and started working as a chef. Growing up, a takeaway was a mathematical problem. It wasn't food that you took away to eat at home or in the street. And pizza was something to do with the Leaning Tower that was somewhere in Italy. Potato chips came in one flavour, plain, and they came with a little bag of blue salt. Rice was never eaten as a main meal, it was always for your dessert, as a rice pudding. McDonald's didn't open their first store in the UK until they opened one in 1974 in Woolwich in London. Until then, a Big Mac was what we wore when it was raining. In those days, brown bread was only what poor people ate. Oil wasn't used for cooking, it was used for lubricating and putting in your car's engine. Lard was what we used for cooking. Tea was made in a teapot using tea leaves and never tea bags, and it was never green. In the 1950s and 1960s, sugar wasn't regarded as being unhealthy. In fact, it was said to give you energy. Looking at people today with all the warnings about eating sugar, there are a lot more obese people today than there were in those days. And cube sugar, that you don't see much anymore, was regarded as being very posh. Fish fingers first hit the freezers in the shops in the mid-1950s, and they were an immediate hit, with over 600 tonnes being sold in the first 12 months of them hitting the shops. Whereas sashimi and sushi wouldn't arrive in the country till decades later, and eating raw fish was more associated with poverty. No one had ever heard of yogurt back in those days. Well, not in Middlesbrough anyway. Maybe they were eating it down south because they were always a little bit ahead of us down there. When I was growing up, healthy food consisted of anything edible, because we were only too happy just to get a meal on the table. Back in those days, if you didn't peel potatoes, you were considered lazy. Indian restaurants were only found in India, though they did start to get more popular towards the end of the 60s, when many immigrants started to arrive in the town. In the 1950s and 1960s, and even the 70s I suppose, cooking outside was called camping. In those days, seaweed wasn't recognised as a food, it was just something that got washed up on Redcar or Scarborough Beach. And in the 1960s, kebabs wasn't even a word in the Oxford Dictionary, never mind a food. And prunes were for medicinal purposes only and not classed as gourmet food. Surprisingly, muesli was ready available, but it was mainly used for feeding cattle. Water came out of the tap, and if someone had suggested bottling it and charging more than petrol for it, they would have been laughed out of town. And lastly, the things that we never had on our dining room table in the 1950s and 60s was elbows and phones. So if, like I was before I moved to Thailand, you're sick of your own country that's getting more and more remote by the day, and where your rights are being slowly taken away from you by your so-called governments, where the country that you were born and grew up in is deteriorating so much that you don't even recognise it as your own anymore, maybe it's time to consider retiring overseas. If that's the case, take a look at my new book, The Retire in Thailand Handbook 2023. It's filled with everything that you'll need to know about living in the land of smiles. Or, if Thailand doesn't rock your boat, take a look at my book, The 10 Best Countries to Retire to on Your Pension. Thailand, Malaysia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Bali, Indonesia, Spain, Portugal, Costa Rica, Belize and Panama. So thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Cheers for now.